Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and no, I'm not wearing contacts. I just had a headache all day, and glasses plus ring light makes headache worse. But I couldn't not review another indie book, because this is basically all my channel is at this point. Today I am reviewing The Loom of Sorrows by Matthew Cagle. This is an sci-fi with some religious overtones, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But this revolves around a humanity that has gone through some stuff. There was an apocalyptic event, and these aliens came to usher humans to this other planet called Joshua 20. Yes, it is in reference to the Bible. And Joshua 20 was not a kind place. It was a horrible environment on the surface, so they all had to live underground, and it was very dystopian. And in this group, there rose a man called N1, or Enon. It was kind of strange how the names were pronounced, because as they were each labeled with this crude marking system, his name was literally N and a 1. But as I read it, I kept wanting to pronounce his name Enon. Like, that seemed to make more sense to me for some reason. But his name is Enon. And Enon, along with a small team, years later goes back to Earth and discovers that it is wholly inhabitable again. And for a reason nobody can fathom, rather than sending the message back, Enon goes back himself. And it's this big mystery that no one quite understands. Now, all of this is actually the backstory to our main story, which is this tour guide, who I can't even remember what his name is supposed to be in the beginning, stumbles across this strange man in a red cloak when he goes to lead a group to the portal that humanity used to go to Joshua 20. So there's essentially this standing doorway between the two, but to walk through it is basically death. And the robed man attacks him, and in attacking him, transfers something to him, and suddenly this tour guide is having images that aren't from his own life. And he discovers that he has basically been given the memories of Enon to figure out for himself. He then has to join this order, basically to figure out what he's supposed to figure out about Enon's life. And the big mystery in this is, why did Enon go back? Why did Enon arrive at what was essentially a paradise compared to Joshua 20, but then turn around and return to the dystopian madness? I was actually originally kind of iffy about the premise, only because I was afraid that it would be just a confusing backstory for the sake of a confusing backstory, because the whole we were on Earth, then another planet, then back to Earth at first felt a little contrived. However, because the entirety of the plot is focused on that backstory and unraveling it, it doesn't feel too busy. It's not like they had this backstory and then another plot on top of it. And the Earth post Joshua 20 is also different than the Earth before. They now have city-states instead of countries. They have all these new religions. Like I said, religion kind of plays a factor into it. And I really liked the world building. I've wanted some nice chunky world building for a while. And you don't get too much. Like, as a tour guide, our protagonist, who later becomes known as Keldon, he can be like, oh yes, the people from this city-state, they're all kind of like this, and in this city-state they all believe this. So like, you kind of get like an overview of a little bit of what they all believe, or a little bit of their culture, which I really liked. That it felt like a world where, I mean, granted there was a lot of stereotyping, but you know, it's the future. We haven't totally, you know, gotten past that. There was a lot about religion in general. In becoming one of these figures to figure out Enon's memories, he essentially has to join a religion. There was a metaphor with a loom that I only partially understood. It took a little bit of rereading, because it was one of those really trippy, we are all one fabric of time and space type of things. I particularly love, there's a saying, the people of this order, they don't just say see you later, they say may I be reborn as you, as like a way of saying farewell, which I thought was both so cheesy and also fun, which isn't a lot of the book. The book is played very earnestly, played very straight. It's not supposed to read schlocky, even though it definitely has roots in that early 2000s mass market paperback sci-fi schlockiness, but I love that kind of sci-fi, so it really worked for me. Now, this is definitely a book where if you are a beginner to sci-fi, this is not going to ease you into it at all. This was all the sci-fi and all of the fancy ruminations on time and philosophy, as well as mechanics. I particularly like when they talk about the nodes that they use in lieu of fingers to find these memories. That was all that of fun. It didn't feel like too much. It wasn't like they weren't dropping like constant references to fancy technology. So it wasn't like it wasn't up its own butt to be sci-fi, if I'm trying to swear less. But my particular favorite parts of it were the flashbacks. So our protagonist, Keldon, has flashbacks to Enon's life, specifically because he's basically got to figure it out. He also, through using the powers that he's given through joining this order, experiences some other various memories of other people. And I always loved the way those were written. The way it was inserted into the story was always fun. Like, it would be like, you know, mid-sentence switch and like a word would be repeated once or twice, and then suddenly that word is part of a different sentence and we're continuing off from that point. And it really played into the fact that for our protagonist, these memories, these flashbacks kind of come out of nowhere and overtake him. There was also a very strict time limit, and I love those. I love when it's like that you have to do this thing in X amount of time or bad things. It ups the tension. And for our protagonist, that was basically that the memories are killing him because the transfer wasn't done correctly. He shouldn't have gotten the memories, essentially. And if he doesn't follow through with it and figure out the big secret of Enon's life, why did he go back, he'll die, more or less. And so he is at a time crunch, and if he dies with the memories of Enon inside him, they die with him, and they will have effectively lost the memories of the man that most people in this world consider their savior. So it's kind of a big deal that he both live and figure it out to pass the memories on to someone else. So it felt like a properly big conflict. Now, the biggest thing that I was super nervous about, but really enjoyed actually, was the aspects on religion. Because as I mentioned before, the planet is named after a verse in the Bible, and that all of the cities and the mountains on this planet are named after, I believe, all from that chapter in the Bible. And I was like, oh, we're not going to beat this over the head one way or the other, are we? And I was really surprised by how evenly it handled the concept of religion. It was neither wholly against it nor wholly for it. It was very much a moderate view. At one point, and I'm going to try not to give too much away, our protagonist, who has been a very devout believer in this one religion, which I believe is pronounced archist. He's an archist. And it has these 20 precepts that you must follow. And at one point in the story, without giving too much away, he comes across information that seriously undermines this faith in a specific way. And the way it handled it, and the way he basically, you know, essentially he's like, I don't want to give up this belief system. I see the good in it, but I need to reevaluate things about it. I really appreciated that kind of even-keeled approach to it. And I'm not even like a person of any faith. I'm agnostic, but just that kind of, they're not going to beat you over the head one way or the other about religion. And I mean, I just really appreciated that because I was a little bit nervous going into it. The big thing though, and the thing that really annoyed me, was where it ended. Now this book is 200 pages long, and it ends before everything is figured out. Now there is a sequel, and I double checked, and that sequel is 250 pages. So I'm sitting here thinking, why wasn't this just all put together to make one solid 450 page book? Now, while I read a ton of indie books, I am not up to date on like the business side of it. I know I've talked to some indie authors that like that have told me things to the extent of like, yeah, we basically had to give away X in the synopsis to get this book to sell. So for all I know, maybe having a single 450-page book would make this less likely to sell, would make it harder. However, for me, it was like, you could have made this all one reading experience. And it doesn't feel money grubbing in any way. I'll say that much. Like, they are very reasonably priced ebooks. Even like, I think the paperback copies of both of these are like under $10. So it doesn't feel like it was split up for the sake of getting money. And where it does cut off does more or less make sense from a like a plot standpoint. But for me, it's like, I don't want to have to stop and restart in a new book. I'd rather just continue it. But then again, apparently I've just been, you know, in the mood for bigger books, apparently. So I ended up giving this book 4 stars. If the author is up for it and is willing to give a copy of the sequel, I will probably read that as well. Like I mentioned before, this is not a book for sci-fi beginners. There's a lot of world building, a lot of talk about different philosophies that are kind of par for the course in sci-fi, and some, you know, fantastic technology. It's a whole different world that you don't recognize. So if you're not already an aficionado of the genre, this probably isn't the best place to start. However, if you do love sci-fi, this is a great example of it. I very much enjoyed it. I even loved like the really, oh, I just remembered, content warnings. Crap. There is, not graphic, but it is there, a scene of rape. That a character views in one of these flashbacks. So be on the lookout for that. Do I need any others? No. Okay. So glad I remembered that. That would have been bad. So anyway, if you like sci-fi, this is definitely one you should check out. This is very sci-fi, but not too much. And I appreciated the philosophy that was there. It was fairly succinct, fairly focused on the themes it wanted to get into, which I always love. If a book's going to get philosophical, you gotta stay focused. But in general, highly recommend it. Now, if you are an indie author and you would like a video review, please email me. I will have that down in the description below with my review policy. Please give that a read through. It answers a lot of questions and saves us a lot of time. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.